if this technology works, because it never fails. Comes to bite me, and then I look silly trying to fix it, even with a degree in computer science. But first of all, thank you for everyone for coming out and inviting me to come speak to you tonight. It's been, as I'll go through my presentation here, we were in the same spot about 10 years ago in Vulcan County, maybe about 11, 12, when we started, when renewable projects started being proposed in our neck of the woods. We were kind of one of the first ones in southern Alberta to be looking at some projects that were a pretty large scale. Obviously, the very south end of the province had some wind projects over the years, but really it started to ramp up in about 2013, which ironically was about right when I got drawn to council. So I kind of had a bit of a first-hand view of how these projects have impacted our municipality, and some of the things that we've seen, the good, the bad, and some of the questions that our residents were asking, as well as some of the questions that us as a council were asking. And I think probably the recurring theme of tonight will be it's stay curious, ask questions, because this is a very different industry compared to what we know. My municipality is probably very similar to the RM of Estevan here. There's oil and gas and farming. That was really the, between agriculture and oil and gas, that was really our two major industries. So this was definitely a departure, and like I said, it's been a bit of an interesting journey so far. So I guess the reason probably that we're about 10 years ahead when these were being proposed is obviously Saskatchewan and Alberta are a little bit different in a few things. Biggest thing in Alberta is our power market is unregulated. So what that means and why that is important is just that private industry is really pushing, they're building the generation, and so it makes it a little more, it's maybe enticed these projects to be built a little bit earlier, but I think as we've seen with everything that's been going on and the push to move to renewable and net zero power generation, it's going everywhere now, and obviously it's very similar climate in southern Saskatchewan here as we have in southern Alberta, and that's one of the reasons why these are being proposed. It usually gets asked, why southern Alberta, why southern Saskatchewan, and it really comes out. There's a few things that are working in our favor that actually make these projects make them possible and viable for some companies to do. And I mean, we obviously you always think solar, hey, put that out in the Nevada desert, right? That's the place you need to put these kind of projects. There's sun all the time, but when it comes down to it, the temperatures actually do make a big difference when it comes to projects, and our lower ambient temperatures up here actually make it a favorable place, as well as things like the angle of sun. We're actually at a pretty good angle when it comes to solar compared to other places, as well as things like consistent wind, and then obviously what a lot of it comes down to is population density. I mean, it's one of those things that they need big tracts of land, and that's what rural municipalities, RMs, counties, that's what we really have to offer. So maybe just for context here, I do have a couple slides just to show you some of the projects that have happened in our area. And first of all, there's a picture of good old Vulcan County. Obviously, one of the other differences in Alberta is all of our smaller municipalities, they all got bunched up in the 50s. So the Vulcan County is the result of about 6 different municipalities. So it ends up being a pretty big area. It's about 1.3 million acres. Typical RMs are kind of in that 200,000 acre range. So we've definitely got a big area. We've got about 4,000 residents that do reside in the rural area. We've got a town and 5 villages there. That brings our population up to about 7,000. So it's very, very comparable to kind of the density and the area. And like I said, very, very similar climate. Lots of agriculture, ranching, and then of course we have oil and gas here. I'm just going to grab the pointer. So in 2013 was kind of what really brought us into the, got us involved in renewables. We had wind project that was proposed at the south end of our county. It was a 300 megawatt project, which was a 166 turbines, which at the time, and I still believe it is, the largest wind project in Canada. And that obviously there was quite a few years of building the project. There was a lot of work behind the scenes that happened, but construction did begin. It did receive its Alberta approvals in May of 2013, and they actually did all 166 towers within a year, which nobody thought would have been possible, but they did accomplish that. So just, a scale, just with that being said, it was about a $600 million project, which was a fair amount of money at the time, still is a fair amount of money. And so one of the things, and I'll mention it with the next projects I go over as well, part of that, obviously, there is the renewable energy credits. That's a big thing that all these projects will talk about. Typically, they will sell these credits to other companies to offset other, it doesn't change their behavior, but they can buy carbon credits to offset it. That's really one of the things that all these do. And ironically, the one in ours has been sold to Pacific Gas and Electric, which is out of San Francisco. So it is what it is. That's the way that they work this. But it is owned by EDF and Enbridge. EDF is a French power company, as well as Enbridge obviously is Canadian. And so they got their towers up, and then they do have proposed they want to put about 1,000 acres of solar as well. That one hasn't happened yet, but they did. That is part of the project that they were going for. So this project, 166 towers, just to get them all spaced out there, you're about 40 kilometers wide. It's quite a project. So in 2013, obviously, we kind of got thrust into it pretty quick. We obviously had a lot of questions, like there would be here tonight. So as a council, we did much the same. We started asking questions, and we actually sent a bunch of staff out to Ontario to try to find people who had dealt with projects like this, and kind of things that they would do differently, and ultimately this project actually went quite well. We had a developer that was really willing to work with residents as well as with the council of the day, and it did go off quite well. Any issues that were brought up were addressed. So for being such a big project and being kind of the first project, we actually had a pretty positive experience with it overall. So it's been in production now for close to 10 years. So that kind of takes us on to, we had a smaller one here as well. Kind of the first solar that came online, it was it's about 150 acres. It's right outside Vulcan. This one's actually owned by First Nation, the Athabasca Chippewan First Nation, which is actually up by Fort McMurray. So it's, anyways, they've invested in some solar projects, and Vulcan was one of them. And this one will feature, you will have batteries on site there, and it was completed last year. But in comparison to the most recent one that we have, it's quite small. So the Traverse Solar Project, you might have heard of this one or seen this one. It is big, 465 megawatts. It's about 3,300 acres, so it is absolutely massive. Largest in Canada. I believe it was top 5 in North America at the time. There's been some more now proposed that will be bigger, but currently it is the largest in Canada that is operating. It was kind of overseen by a Canadian company, but in the end it did sell to the Copenhagen Investment Group, so it is a foreign, kind of a foreign investment fund that ended up buying it. The news that probably most people would have seen is when they announced that we're building it, they sold the energy credits to Amazon. So that was kind of one of the first big Canadian sales. So for Amazon Canada, they offset their carbon based on this project. About $700 million construction cost, and it's about 1.3 million solar panels. So that's a lot of truckloads of solar panels. But it did get completed. A couple notes on this one is the area that it was built in was actually, I guess if you had to pick land to take out of agricultural production to put into solar panels, this one definitely was in some pretty poor land. It was primarily, actually all of it was grazing. It had been broken and wouldn't produce anything, so it did go back into grassland, and then they ended up they acquired the land, or they leased the land for the project here. So it wasn't as controversial as it could have been, just because of some of the siting. It's also in an area where there's really nobody out there as well. So those were a couple of little positives on it that got the project going, and maybe not as controversial as it could have been. And so really, probably, as I go through my notes here, the two projects I'll refer back to is, the solar and the wind. Both of them kind of have little different nuances and pros and cons, but probably referencing back to our two bigger projects. And then, of course, like with anything, there's always, with an industry like this that's involved quickly, we also have 4 other ones that have provincial approval from the Alberta government, and they vary in sizes. Kind of like 700 acres, 600 acres, and then the next one that we have going on is another wind project. It's 83 towers, but these are much larger towers. They're about as big as you can get. I should have looked up, for reference, but from the base to the top of the tip, they will be taller than the Calgary Tower. So they have got to a size that is pretty extraordinary, and that's what's being proposed there. They, like I said, they did get their approval from the Alberta provincial government, and they are starting construction here this spring. So that's kind of the background. That's the wild ride that us as a municipality has seen. So I always get asked, what's your experience been? How has it gone? And 10 years ago, what we really saw is we had a project developer that really wanted to move in and be part of the community. They wanted the community buy-in. They wanted all the landowners to buy in. They compensated landowners that didn't even have them on their land, that they would be, impacted in any way. So we actually had a pretty good working relationship with them. Any issues that arose during construction were always taken care of, very quickly. So it did actually go quite well. The community was very receptive to it, which was almost a little bit of a strange. It's strange how it went. Most evolving industries, the first project is always a controversial one. The first one is, you don't know. It's an unknown. You don't know what's going to happen. But this one was actually, it was never appealed. It was never appealed at the local level. It was actually never even appealed to the province. So it, for whatever reason, I guess maybe they had done their due diligence. They'd answered the questions, and the people in the area were pretty happy. We actually had people speaking in support of the application, both to the county as well as to the province. But what we've seen kind of over the next 10 years is this industry has evolved. It's evolved very quickly, and as it's evolved, we've started to see things starting to pop up that we didn't necessarily see 10 years ago. Our big solar project that came online last year, so it's been in construction for about 2 years. We were able to mitigate some of the issues just with working with the developer as for the siting. We were able to get them access off a provincial highway. We were able to do a whole bunch of little things just so that it wasn't impacting people as much as it potentially could. Once again, good working relationship with the developer definitely helped out with that. Wind and solar, on the development stage has different issues. Obviously, you need to develop 300 acres. There's a lot of dirt work that goes on. There's a lot of things like that, and we did have some issues as we went along, but we were able to work through them. We were able to learn some lessons, and in the end, the project did go off pretty well, and it's now online. It's generating power, and it was pretty well received in the community. We really didn't actually. I don't believe it was appealed either. So it was, so they were able to, get that community buy-in. They were able to get people on side with it. But what we've now seen is it's kind of started to go the opposite way. And part of this is, as this industry has evolved, everybody's trying to make, the absolute maximum profits, and, they're maybe not necessarily in it as a company for the long term. We've been very fortunate with our big projects that the company that owned it was there from day one, from the proposal all the way to the construction to the operation. So that helped alleviate some of the issues that we potentially could have. But now what we're starting to see is that a lot of these projects are being proposed, and then that proposal is being sold to the next company. The next company goes a little bit further and sells it to the next company, and sells it to the next company, and it can make for some issues. And that's what we've really seen. Our wind project that's going on right now has definitely, I would say, hasn't been received as well, and some of it was just because it's changed hands a couple times. As far as questions being answered, or people who've had issues or had concerns about it not getting answered by the developer, it's made it a little more controversial. I know it's they've actually it's been on the news a couple times that there's a group that is opposing it, and did oppose it when it was applied to at the province, but ultimately that group was unsuccessful. And so it is going ahead. We've, as a county, we've been able to work with them, the developer, to mitigate some of the issues, but there still were a lot of just concerns with some of the sightings that didn't go over too well with some of the members of the public. So it got to be a little more controversial than the previous ones had, and that's a big thing. It's if the questions aren't being answered, it starts to get people really concerned, and you should be, because if you don't have the answers, maybe it's not ready to go, or maybe you need to do a little more due diligence before you get to that point. And that's kind of what we're seeing actually on a few of these projects. They've realized under the Alberta system, it's basically, as a municipality, we don't have a lot to say. We kind of get to deal with the issues as they arise. But as far as the approval, it does go to the province. We can present during the application, but as far as us having the ultimate decision making, that was taken away from us. So it presents a little bit of a challenge as a council. How do we deal with these? Because if the province says they're going ahead, they're going ahead. So we had to kind of you ultimately have to work with the developer, because you're trying to mitigate as much as you can, but sometimes that can be difficult. And what we've seen is that now that these projects are being proposed, they've kind of learned the tips and the tricks. They've learned where they can maybe save a little bit of money, or where they can maybe try to push things through a little bit quicker. And the first ones, they were willing to take the time to make sure it was a good project. Now we're starting to see it's a rush. It's they've got investors, they need to be up and running, and it starts to sometimes be a little. It definitely makes it more controversial, just because questions aren't being answered, and that's what we've definitely seen on some of these newer projects here. And it's kind of unfortunate that that's the way it's going, because usually when an industry as it develops, it gets easier and easier, to build these projects. We've actually kind of seen it go the opposite way, which is definitely concerning. And that's why as a county, we're definitely trying to work with the Alberta government to try to fix some of these issues and have them address it. Because the thing with all of these projects is you need to have a certain economy of scales to really make them viable anymore. I mean, it used to be they would do solar projects 10, 20 acres, and you can work with that. When you start getting up into thousands of acres, or hundreds of acres, or hundreds of towers, it starts to just become at such a scale that as a landowner and as a municipality, it's hard to deal with. And so we've definitely been trying to work with the province to get some guidelines in place, so that we're all on the same page, and we're not ending up with a liability on our hands. And I'll get into that a little bit more. Just some of the questions that have been brought to us, or questions that I still feel are either unanswered, or are valid questions that as an landowner you should probably be asking. And so the question we always get asked is, okay, well, obviously Eugene goes, well, Vulcan County is obviously pro-renewable. This is good for you guys, and it has been. It really as far as the biggest benefit to a county is its tax base. I mean, and that's you want good development, but these have definitely changed the economy of Vulcan County. We were pretty heavy into oil and gas. We were a shallow gas site, so about 60% of our assessment base was oil and gas, and 40% would have been agriculture. But now, with basically 2 projects that have come online, we're about 50 to 55% would be renewable. The windmills alone are 20% of our assessment base. The solar is going to be almost 30, maybe a little bit over once all the final numbers come back. So it has definitely changed the dynamics of our county and how we operate. So I mean that's it's a benefit. It has definitely benefited us, especially as oil and gas has kind of went down. Being a pretty established oil and gas field, a lot of our assessment disappeared. So this has replaced it and actually increased it in comparison even to the peak years of oil and gas. The other pro obviously is as landowner. I mean these things do pay. I mean it's every landowner, whether you're active in agriculture or not, I mean it's you have to look at the economics, and the numbers that are being thrown around are big. I mean it's a wind tower, I've heard in the neighborhood of $15,000 to $20,000 a tower is what they're paying landowners to put them on. We've heard it in our area. The closer you get to Calgary, the higher the price. But I mean, we've heard land leases up to $1,000 an acre on some of these solar projects now. So when the developer comes knocking, it is pretty lucrative, and I think it can be pretty easy to when that big check is being proposed to you, to maybe sometimes not do your due diligence, or to jump into something that you might not be as informed as you could be on. And that's natural. Like I said, it's anybody who owns land. Sometimes you do have to make a business decision when it comes to that. So a lot of the ones that signed up on for the towers as well as the solar in our area, they basically said, it's a financial decision. It's a check if it rains or doesn't rain, and still it's a check in the mail, and it kind of helps them sustain their farming operations, and that's kind of why they decided to take a chance on it and sign their land up for the project. We've also seen one thing as a municipality we really have tried to push all our developers into is showing that community benefit. We've been actually successful with all the projects we've got so far in having them come up with making sure that they're supporting the community. Oil and gas set a pretty high bar for community support. I think anybody who played hockey probably in the last 30 years had an oil company logo on the back of their jersey, and that was something that we really pushed as these projects were being developed. Is that it was the full expectation of a small community that if you want to be a part of the community, that's what it looks like to be part of the community. So we have had pretty good success with that. It's something that typically they don't offer until as a community or even as a council you push, because like I said, they're usually they can be generous, but sometimes they do take a little bit of prodding to get there. I mean, obviously, other pro is it's jobs. It's these do take a lot of labor to build these projects. I mean, those are temporary jobs. So I mean, it's great for the time, but once they're up and running, they do take a bit of maintenance. There's a lot of maintenance of the area, whether it's vegetation maintenance, whether it's maintenance just the panels itself. And so it's not, I think if you compare the amount of investment to oil and gas, obviously the amount of jobs it produces is far less, but in a small community, 10, 15 jobs is, it does make an impact. And just for example, where the solar project is, I mean, it's outside of a village of 120 people, so you bring in 10 full-time permanent jobs plus 15, 20 maintenance jobs. It does change a small community, so they have benefited from that. But of course, with anything, there's always the flip side too. There's things that need to be taken into consideration, because the last thing you want to do with any of this is short-term gain, long-term pain, right? It's easy to sign everything up and then realize in 10 years, oh no, maybe we missed some things, or we didn't prepare for that worst case scenario. And I think after being on council for 10 years, you always feel like you're almost negative about everything, because it's you're always thinking about the worst case scenario. People, oh, don't worry about that. And every time you don't worry about the worst case scenario, something of course happens, and then you're dealing with that for decades down the road. So one thing we've definitely seen that's changed is as this industry has developed, all these companies are trying to do things very quietly. I think they must have seen from the earlier projects that being too open and up front to sometimes cost you more money, right? Because people are asking for things, or people are asking to take care of things. So we've definitely seen a little bit of a reluctance with developers that are kind of coming in, in the second wave of renewables. And a lot of them, I just spoke with one landowner, because I was trying to, of course, I'm a farmer. You always want to know what the neighbors was getting paid for oil, right? If your neighbor got $3,000, you were trying to get $3,100 from the company. So obviously, I was making a few phone calls to see, what people had, what deals people were getting. It's starting to get, everybody goes, I can't tell you. And I had to sign an NDA in order to get the thing. So that's concerning. That's concerning as a county is we can't even really get that information to try to put people's minds at ease. But I think once again, everybody's trying to save a buck. And I think also what they're starting to realize is that there's enough money flowing around that you go to Farmer A and say, hey, I'll give you $500. And then you go to neighbor B and go, well, would you do it for $400? And all of a sudden we end up with a race to the bottom. So that's definitely a trend that I don't think is really helping this industry. I think it's something that they really need to, they need to be transparent about what they're doing. And when you're making people sign an NDA, it makes it a little more difficult, as well as part of that NDA. It also covers, how you get into reclamation. So the big difference is, we're oil and gas. We're all pretty familiar with, how that's worked. And even in the worst case scenario, where oil companies, we're going bankrupt and we're opening wells or abandoning wells. There was a mechanism to get it cleaned up. Whether it was, the province and the feds were somehow they were involved because of the mineral rights. But there's a big difference with these renewable projects. This is a private development on private land, and so ultimately the reclamation does fall into it does end up in the landowner's lap, and that is something as a landowner, you have to consider when you're being proposed, when one of these is being proposed. Now, I'm also a councillor, so I'm looking at it from a municipal angle as well, and I think we're all smart enough people in this room to realize if you have 160 acres or 300 acres of solar panels and the company walks away, you're probably not going to be able to do a whole lot with it. So then you start getting to that point of, well, what happens? What happens if that person just walks away? What happens if that person just doesn't pay their taxes? And that's when as a municipal, sitting on a municipal council or an RM council, that's when you start to get a little bit concerned is, what's the plan for that? And unfortunately, now that a lot of them want to sign an NDA, we don't really know what is in there. I know, for all the projects that have got their approvals, there's been probably 20 others that have tried to build a project, and we've heard things like, we've heard some that, they'll put every year, they put some money into a reclamation fund, and then at the end of 20 years, there should be enough money there to take care of everything. And that sounds, reasonable, but I've heard ones that, for the first 10 years, they wouldn't put anything in the reclamation fund. So every one of these contracts is different. There is really no standard, and I think that's something as a landowner and as well as a municipality you have to keep in mind is that there's no standard contract here. So what you're being offered could be vastly different, and they also be, there also may be that the developer is probably also, trying to find the best deal when it comes to land, when it comes to, where to put these things. So it's that's definitely one thing that varies very differently from oil and gas is the fact that every one of these contracts is different. And as I mentioned before, a lot of these, it's kind of second wave of projects. It's everybody's realized this is a is a technology that is definitely being pushed, being pushed worldwide, the push to go to green energy, so everybody wants to get involved, everybody wants to, be part of it, and so we're definitely seeing that trend of, companies coming in, trying to build a project and then sell to the next company. And then that company comes in and tries to, do all the planning and get through the regulatory stage, and then sells it to the next company that actually is going to build the project. And then that company, they'll get the project built, and then they sell to the next company who actually wants to own it in the end. So that's made it very difficult, both from a municipal standpoint, because every 3 months you can end up dealing with somebody else. Potentially, we've seen some sell 5 times before they actually got online. But also, you as a landowner, that's something you want to keep in mind too. So I wrote here everything in writing. I think, especially in rural areas, we're all pretty comfortable with a handshake agreement, right? If somebody comes and you make a deal, you shake your hand, and it just gets taken care of. These are a lot different. These are big developments, they're big projects, and it's definitely a little bit of a different thing than we're used to dealing with. One of the things we've also gotten a lot of questions on is just wildlife and environmental concerns. To speak on the two projects we have, anytime we build windmills, everybody asks about birds. We haven't seen a big issue with bird strikes. I know they have to monitor pretty closely under the provincial. In Alberta, under the provincial legislation, they have to report bird strikes and everything. And I've spoken to a couple of people who have these windmills on. One lady I know, she walks down the road every morning for a morning walk, and she said every morning she looks to see if there's birds, because that was her concern. She was going to hit birds, and she said it's been 10 years, and she said she still hasn't found a bird. So that was one thing. Whether it's just was because of where they were placed or whatnot, we haven't seen the wildlife concerns that have been brought up on some of these applications. Environmental concerns, the biggest thing is they're taking up big areas of land, getting it reseeded into grass or reseeded into something productive or into something that isn't going to just blow. It has been a little bit of a challenge. I would assume that your climate would be very similar. It's something that, as a municipality, we've been able to work. We've seen some very interesting environmental plans proposed to us. We had one developer who never got very far, unsurprisingly. And said, "Oh, well, we're gonna put native grasses back." Okay, well, how are you gonna do that? And their plan was never gonna work. We're in a dry climate. You have to. There's a lot of things. If you're gonna break up native grass and then try to plant it back, that's a 5-year process if you're lucky and it actually rains. And they said, "Well, no, it's cool. We got an environmentalist and he's in Toronto and he says this will work." And it's like, yeah, that's but ultimately they came to a realization that maybe the people on the ground and the municipality might actually know what they're talking about, and ultimately that project never really went all that far. So I guess another question that we've got in the past is how does this impact land values? Obviously, the people who have it on their land, their economic impact is they get a check every year. But what about people in the area? How does that impact land values in the area? And I get that one all the time, and that's an extremely hard one to quantify because a couple things have happened. On our first, the project that's been in place for 10 years, the wind towers, that one, obviously 10 years later, I would say the land values have actually gone up. And we had an assessor kind of look at everything to try to give us any sort of indication, is this negatively impacting land values? But we've never really been able to get a very clear answer because a few things have happened. Obviously with COVID, we saw an exodus from the major centers out to the villages and to the towns. So that drove the prices up probably artificially. So that's unfortunately not really a indicator we were able to use. And then what we've seen with other farmland in the areas, when 166 people are getting a check for $15,000 a year, there's a little more money flowing around and people are actually bidding up the land. So we've actually seen the land values go up. Now, like I said, this is artificial, but it is a question and a concern that we do get quite often. It's just, will it negatively impact our land values? And I still, 10 years later, I still say the answer is I don't know, maybe not. In our area, like I said, the prices still went up, but there are some other extenuating circumstances that could that are playing into that equation. Yeah, a lot of it, we get a lot of environmental questions. The wind hasn't really been too much of an issue. It's a pretty small footprint. As far as when it comes to the soil blowing or weed issues, we haven't had issues with that. The solar is a little bit different. That big of an area, it's hard to establish too much crop underneath it or get grass established. It takes a while. The ones in our area, the way they're kind of mitigating that is to try to keep the soil healthy, keep the grass healthy. Is they actually do graze sheep under them, so they are still using it as they are still using it for agricultural production. It's much different than it was, but they are able to kind of take care of weeds and grass and get that grass established so that it doesn't turn into a weedy nest. They have been successful in that. Yeah, so I guess the next part here is just when people ask me for advice, what do I say? We've kind of had a front row seat here for 10 years, and going back to kind of at the opening, it's be curious, ask those questions, and if everybody just keeps asking, eventually, you hope you can get to an answer, and if not, then you probably have something. You probably have a legitimate concern if nobody's willing to answer the questions, and some of the questions are hard to answer. Some of it is, it's questions. Well, what happened 30 years down the road, and that is a hard one to answer. But it is something that if you do have a developer that is actually wanting to be part of the community, wanting to do good development, they are usually pretty. They will answer your questions, or at least try to answer your questions. As far as municipality, it's the same. It's you do have a lot of knowledge, even as a landowner. If you're looking to sign your land up, you know the land a lot better than any geologist or any biologist out in Toronto. So you're definitely a source of information. And as a municipality, we tried to come up with win-wins. These got approved by the province, and we were the ones that ended up having to go into our backyard, and so we kind of took the approach that it was when they got their approval, how do we make this a win-win? And for the most part, I think we have with our two big projects, we've made them as much of a win-win as possible, and that's it took a lot of work. It took a lot of relationship building. It took a lot of discussions and time, but I believe that they have gone off relatively well. But obviously, it is concerning to see some kind of the trends that are happening, and it's making it a little bit harder to view it as a win-win if some of these things aren't being addressed. So, then it goes on to your landowner. Obviously, the first thing I tell people to do if they're off a contract is talk to a lawyer. Don't just go to any lawyer. Go find a lawyer that's actually dealt with these things, because there are a lot of details that you want to make sure that you're covering yourself on. If you're considering signing your land up for some of these leases, you might end up with liabilities. You might also sign your line. You might also sign your land up, and then we've seen some areas they signed their land up for 10 years, and the company was never able to build a project, and they missed out on other things because they had actually signed it up exclusively for 10 years. So another thing you need to keep in consideration. And then you really the big one, especially in Alberta, that we're really fighting with is reclamation plans. How does that look? Because I'm sure most people have it written in their contract, but is that actually going to happen? In 25 years, if the company walks away, what happens? And that's really something that you want to make sure that you're getting good advice on, because another interesting thing that I just had talked to a colleague about was even just when it comes to taxes. You as a landowner, if you've got let's even just say a turbine on your land and they walk away, well, what happens? Well, the municipality still sends out the tax bill. That's how taxes work. You don't get to pick and choose who pays the taxes. So you may end up with that tax bill. And if that company is nowhere to be found, you want to make sure that you're covered, or you've taken that into consideration, because that is something that these are taxed at a pretty high rate. I mean, I should have done the math per tower, but I mean, for our municipality, the wind brings about $3.5 million a year. The solar is going to be about $4 million a year. So I mean, they are a high taxed item. So if there's no company to pay the tax bill, you as a landowner, you're next up in the queue. And then same with reclamation. If the company does walk away, well, you got to do something with it, and ultimately, you might not have the capabilities to remediate it. And then, as a municipality, if you end up having to walk away from your land, then the municipality kind of by default gets involved. So there are some considerations to be made there, and how reclamation plans, how reclamation bonds, all that is taken into consideration. And it's a pretty important one, because unfortunately, as a landowner in a private deal like this, you are the next man up. Other just things is just even how you're going to use the rest of your land. We've seen some of these solar projects. And this, let's see if I can actually go back here. Look at that. It's going to be hard to see in the back there, but usually they're trying to follow the contours of the land or whatever. So sometimes you end up with these weird triangles or weird areas that almost just by default follow production, just because you can't get machinery in there. So that's one thing to think of too, if you are being approached, is just how you would be able to use the rest of your land. Could use the rest of your land. There's issues like that sometimes arise. And I bolded it, and I think I wrote it twice or 3 times in my notes. It's just everything in writing. These are big corporations. These are big dollar projects, and a handshake or an agreement or a guy saying, yeah, don't worry, we'll take care of it, just doesn't work anymore in this day and age. And we've seen people who have some issues with that, where Company A promised them this, and then Company B bought the project, and Company B doesn't want to do what Company A promised. And if you don't got it in writing, it's your word against theirs, and then the only ones who win is the lawyers. So yeah, it's definitely something that if you are looking at something like this, you want to take into consideration, is that unfortunately, yeah, you usually got to get a lawyer involved, or you got to get it in writing, but it is an important step. So I think, yeah, that's a lot of me rambling. That's a lot of some boring information. Hopefully, it's useful and kind of shows the journey that we've been on, and some of the things that we've seen. And I'm happy now to turn it over to Brian. He'll correct me and give lots of other information and things for you to chew on. But happy. I think probably one of the biggest values would be with questions. Happy to answer. Kind of let you know what my perspective is, things we've seen, answer those questions afterwards, and I'll be around afterwards as well if you want to come hit me up. Happy to talk about it. I didn't think 10 years ago I'd be making presentations on renewable energy, but hey, here we are. So it's something that has kind of become a pretty big thing, just because of our location and some of these big projects that we've ended up having cited in our municipality. So that's it. I'll happily turn it over to you, Brian, if you want to bring her home.